Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We discuss 6 questions in less than 9 minutes because leaders know how to be concise. Let's go ahead and get started. Question number 1, in a few sentences, tell us who you are and what you do.
So my name is Douglas Muir, and I'm a fund manager for my own fund for accredited investors and family offices.
Great.
What I do is going to be kind of interesting. You're going to like this. So for the first 20 years of my life, I was an airline captain. And I started my first company in 1992 and got bit by this. I couldn't even spell entrepreneur, but this entrepreneur bug, and started a company and sold it to an AT&T subsidiary, made all this money. And I'm like, these entre whatevers make a lot of money. And I was really excited. I loved it. So I started my full-time entrepreneur career in 2004 when I retired from the airlines after 20 years. And then from there, I in 2012 became a professor. And I was a professor at the University of Virginia, and now I'm a professor up here in New York City, and then became a Wall Street investor for the last 3 years. So my life is kind of taken a few different courses, but at the high point, we had 7,000 employees, 5 companies, and we were worldwide. Yeah, we were pretty large.
Wow, that's fantastic. I still can't spell entrepreneur, by the way. I spell it all the time. I still can't do it. I thank heavens for spell check, right?
Right?
Question number 2, what's the best thing about working with a team?
You know, the best thing about working with a team is that it's able to fill in the gaps of the CEO or the president.
Mhm.
We are all limited. I think my blessing in life was to know that I was absolutely not the smartest man in the room. And that really served me very well. For an example, I'm an aerospace engineer. I crush math. I could barely read and write. And so I have an editor, which makes me look fantastic. I'm very fast. So I have other people that are slower, and we go through little canals, as we call it, before decisions are made. To be able to have a team is so important. And that's why I think this podcast is fantastic. But you have to, as you said before, you have to hire that right team. It's very important.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing those insights. Question number 3, I hear from other leaders of teams that it can be a challenge to get team members engaged. Tell me your thoughts on that.
So I have to go back again to having the right people on the bus, as you probably heard about.
Mhm.
But more important, having the right people in the seats, right? In the right seats. And I'll give you an example. My assistant for, God, I think she was with me for 15 years before I ended up selling everything. She came on as um, uh, she was entering data,
Mhm.
and she was the worst data entry person in the world. Now I'm going to send her this podcast. So as I called her into the office to fire her, I said, Lauren, what would you do if you didn't have to work for a living? She says, I would organize people. Well, at that point, we were growing at 5 employees a week. It was crazy insane. And so I put her in the right seat, and she excelled. You know, today you talked about Gallup. What I do is I make sure now that when my teams are together, that I use the Myers-Briggs test.
Mhm.
And it's very important that you put the teammates together that are going to work. You use Gallup, I use the Myers-Briggs. Whatever you want to do, it's very important you get the right people on the bus, get them in the right seat. And the way to do that is through testing.
Mm. What a great example of finding someone's right fit and being able to
Oh,
utilize them. What a great success story. Thank you for sharing that. Question number 4, what other piece of advice would you give to leaders of teams?
so the other advice I would give is, and as you know, and you help your clients with, is to interview. My father told me this. I was an airline pilot, so what did I know about hiring, right? You get a seniority number. You start off I'll age myself, as a flight engineer, and then you go to co-pilot, and then you go to captain. Hiring, he said, son, employees are going to be your hardest thing to do. And I said, Dad, it can't be. It's probably going to be raising money, getting money, keeping the company viable. He says, employees. And boy, was he right on that. So you have to interview. You have to make sure you interview. When you're done interviewing, other people need to interview. right? So you don't have this, one person, I like this personality. You have to go through a series of interviews. And I always wondered why airline interviews took 3 days. And I totally get it. I totally get it. You have to give testing. You need to call up and look at references. I'm not talking right now to people who have 7,000 employees. I'm talking to people who have 10 employees, 5 employees. That is more important than when you have a lot of employees like I had, right? So it's got to be the interview process. The hiring the right people is everything, and to be able to test them to make sure you put them in the right seat. I would say that is the way to do it. You do it through Gallup. I do it through Myers-Briggs. But that would be the one piece of advice. Take your time in hiring, because your employee, if it's a bad one, could be your worst nightmare. And I got a million of those stories.
Well, I could not agree more. That is a critical piece. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Fifth question. What other successful leaders have you experienced in your life that have had a positive influence on you and how you lead?
I had a chain of restaurants, and they were Italian restaurants. I named it after my wife. It was called Bella's. It was awesome. And I had this gentleman come in, and it was in Charlottesville, Virginia. And the waiter comes up and says, "New Yorker, table 23." And when they say New Yorker, table 23, in an Italian restaurant in Virginia, you're like, oh my God, they're gonna give me heck, right? But my wife's from Rome, Italy, so she knows how to cook. And his name was Richard Rosenblatt, and he owns Rosenblatt Securities on Wall Street. He has the most seats on the New York Stock Exchange. He's awesome. So Dick and I became friends because I always wanted to be a financial guy. And he called me up, and I was in New York, and I was visiting him. He brought me on the floor. Nicest man in the world. Nicest man in the world. And the thing I learned the most from him, because when I decided to move back to New York City to be with my family after 38 years of being down south, I went to Dick. I'm like, "Hey, Dick, do you know anybody who needs help? And he goes, "Yeah, we do. I need help doing this, this, and this." And so I got hired by him. And just watching him, he was this class act that was strong but fair. That's the key. He was strong but fair. Now, this happened later in my entrepreneur career, but still, I still remember him with a very big heart. And he was probably the best leader that I've met. And then his president, Joe Goronsky. Those are the two guys that I really look up to.
Well, thank you for sharing those. It's just always an impressive opportunity to hear what kinds of people they've networked with and what kind of influence other leaders have had in their lives. So thank you for sharing those. I really appreciate that. Final question. Tell us about your first job.
So my first job, I was a gas station attendant in Gas City. Now, in New Jersey, you still cannot pump your own gas. I don't know if you knew that.
I did, yes.
So I was a gas station attendant in the freezing cold weather. Back then, credit cards were rarely used. It was all cash. The wind is whipping around. I learned how to make sure that if I was short on the money, I learned that once. When I was short on the money, I had to pay that back. So I came up with a system to make sure I wasn't short anymore. I learned how to multitask. I learned how to respect a dollar, because I think I was getting $1.50 an hour or $2 an hour. I'm dating myself. So I learned so much from Gas City. Pumping gas was my first. And that's why I believe that we need to be very careful on what we do, because we got to make sure that the high school kids are able to get jobs, to learn like I did. If we price them out of the market, we got to be very careful about that so that they can learn like I learned. It was a great job. It really was. It was a great job.
Thanks for sharing that. I relate very well to the pumping gas because I grew up in Oregon, where I believe, just like New Jersey, they still don't allow you to pump your own gas. And so,
is that right?
I grew up not pumping my own gas, and then when I left the state and had to start pumping my own, I didn't know how to do it. And so
that's great.
I've never had to do it. So anyway, thank you so much for sharing that, Douglas, and thank you also for being on the podcast. How can people get a hold of you?
Yes, they could get a hold of me through my email, which is Douglas@familybusinessfund.com. That's Douglas@familybusinessfund.com, and or my LinkedIn. I'm open to LinkedIn. I'm on Premium. I love LinkedIn, and that's how you and I met. And if we could talk to people here, right? It's all about networking. And now I had the pleasure of meeting you, and so LinkedIn is very powerful, especially for new business owners. You can learn a ton on LinkedIn. I learn a lot still to this day.
Always more to learn, isn't there?
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you so much. This is Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. For more ideas, look up our other posts on LinkedIn by searching Blue Sky Business Consulting. Thanks so much for joining us today. Have a great day.